Hi, thanks for tuning in to Explanar Explains. I'm Nick and I'm here with Luther Blacklock, Master PGA Professional and inventor of the Explanar golf machine. And we've had quite a few questions over the last few weeks in response to some of the videos we put onto YouTube and Instagram, and I thought you would take a few moments today to go through some of those questions, Luther, and give some answers to some of the people that are tuning in.
Yeah, it's great, Nick, and it's great to get your feedback. It really is. So we can't answer all the questions, but a lot of you ask the same questions, so it's well worth letting us know, and we can clarify and expand on anything that you want us to, really.
Okay, great. So let's kick off. We have an email came in from an Andy Smythe, who viewed one of your videos on Bryson Dechambeau, in which you talked about his wrist-free golf swing. And Andy's question was, is it really risk-free, or does it really just look like it's risk-free because wrist action in the golf swing is obviously a huge power source?
Yeah, it's a fascinating question because it's the way that a playing pro, what he perceives he's doing, what he's actually doing, are often two different things. There's a famous thing on Ben Hogan. Ben Hogan did a slow motion swing. He was at the beach, and it was like a home movie, and he did what he thought was a slow motion movement of his actual swing, and you lay that over his normal swing, and there was no comparison. So sometimes great players have a perception of what they're doing, but we know that in Dechambeau's case, he lifts the wrist higher as he's got a one plane address, and he's trying to play the shot with no wrist hinge, and essentially he gets rid of half his wrist hinge, Nick, because of doing that. There's normally an angle between the forearm and the shaft, but because Bryson does that, he's lost 45 degrees of wrist hinge already.
So simply setting the hands a little higher at address?
Yeah, so that does, and that's where if you want to hit the ball low to the wind of an iron, you pull the club up your sleeve and you get that flat. But what happens with Bryson, he then has to turn his shoulders in an incredibly wide arc. But when the body starts down, a lag occurs, and in a very short space of time, he gains wrist hinge that he then dispenses, holds onto the shot, and the momentum, and then late on, he will get a little bit of wrist cock. So he does get some from the natural lag, but the biggest cause of non-wristy takeaway is the fact that he goes for the one plane setup where the arms and the club are in a straight line.
Okay, because Andy's question was, he took a picture of Dechambeau at the top of his backswing and said, hey, it looks like he's fully loaded here with his wrists. Yeah. So what you're saying really is that that picture was captured really just at the start of the downswing where the lag is created.
Yeah. So one of the confusing things, because we know that if we look at slow motion, that the great players, when the club is stationary at the top, in that sort of, it's off bowed, in that static motion, a static moment, sorry, then the hips and the body have already started down, and the clearance of the left side and the body creates a lag, and wrist hinge is acquired in a very short space of time that he then dispenses. So he's absolutely right. For a nanosecond, it looks like the wrists have cocked, but you've got to go back to the structure of the club, because with the driver, there's very little wrist hinge to be found. Are you with me? So basically, with the driver, you're only finding about that much wrist cock. But with a wedge, you're finding 3 times as much wrist cock. Okay. So it's a combination of what the player perceives and actually the club that he's using.
Okay, so why don't you show us a little bit about what you mean there?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's always good to have the model of the Explanar swing. And I've got a 6-iron here, but we'll just imagine that it's a longer club. So Bryson stands there, he'd raises his wrist. So what we have is a straight line from the ball up the shaft through the front into the upper sternum, whereas most of us have an angle between the left arm and the shaft. Now, because Bryson has got no wrist hinge, he looks rather wooden in the takeaway. Now this is the phase we just mentioned, because all of a sudden he starts down, and as his body clears, it creates legs. So there's an area there where he finds wrist hinge. He's got no wrist cock in this part. But in here, the lag occurs, and he comes back in, and he holds the wrist out for as long as he can. But even in the follow-through, there's a hint. So you'll see quite noticeably with the driver that there will be 90 degrees here, but it happens in a nanosecond just after the downswing has started. So does that make sense, Nick?
Yeah, that's great.
Yep.
Thanks. Which, of course, leads on to the obvious question,
yeah,
is should the average golfer try to emulate Bryson's swing?
He should try it. I think we should all try it, because we do make breakthroughs, and things that were at one stage in history, you know, we were taught to pull with the left hand, other times we're taught to hit with the right hand. You know, we go through phases and we go through fashions. So for the club golfer, you have to be an athlete to make as big a body coil as Bryson does. So if you're not limited in that regard, anything you do to load the body and use the body is great. But we mustn't throw out the baby with the bathwater. There's still a place for hand speed and forearm rotation, you know?
Okay, yeah, and of course we've got the Masters coming up fairly soon as well. So while we're on the subject of modern power golf swings, we've got DJ defending his title from, what, 5 months ago at Augusta.
That's right.
And so he has a power swing, but in a slightly different model of Bryson Dechambeau. So maybe you can talk a little bit about how Dustin Johnson's power swing works. Again, not a model I'm assuming most amateurs should be copying.
No, I could say directly in answer to that then, you ask, can the club golfer do what Bryson does? Well, to the best of their physical ability they can. Whereas Dustin Johnson's swing, great athlete, I mean, superb physical specimen, great temperament, but we know that he's always been a little bit suspect with less than a full shot with the wedges. So I wouldn't recommend anybody to have the bowed wrist there, but in every other regard, Dustin is creating huge power with long levers, and as he makes his downswing, he's clearing his hips and his legs in a very athletic way. So yes, if you're physically capable enough, copy Bryson, but I would be guarded about recommending anybody to play from such a bowed wrist.
Okay.
Having said that, of course, there's always golfers out there like Sergio who disprove the rule. Yeah.
Right, cool. That's great, Luther, thank you. And a second question from a Graham Harper concerns Lee Westwood. Obviously, we've seen Lee have a couple of great weeks on the PGA Tour. I think he won 2.6 million in 2 weeks, which is not bad by anybody's standards.
No, he's had a good time.
And I just wondered what your thoughts were on Lee's longevity, really. We've seen him competing at a really high level for the best part of, I guess, over 2 decades now. And, you know, looks like he's getting better and better. And is it a swing thing? Is it a mindset thing? What's the secret to Lee's long-term success?
It's a multifaceted question, therefore multifaceted answer. But Lee's a tremendous example, as you say, of longevity and why. Well, he has kept in physically good shape. He is trim at the moment. He's also in a very good place psychologically. He's got his girlfriend Helen caddying for him, and he looks so relaxed at Sawgrass and at the Arnold Palmer Invitational, you know, playing with Bryson. So Lee
seems like he's enjoying golf much more than he's ever previously done, by the looks of it.
Yeah, and he's always been strong mentally. When he was just a teenager and played in his first Open, which was the Tom Lehman Open at Lytham, what the players would do in the locker room, there was a sheet you'd pencil your name in for your practice time, and there was 2 names, Nicklaus and Watson, and 19-year-old Lee had no problem putting his name there in pencil next to that of Tom Watson, and went out and had a practice round with them. So Lee's always had that wonderful self-belief, great attitude, a great ambassador for golf, and he's just about as orthodox as you can get, except for one little idiosyncrasy where his left arm is bent at impact.
That's right. We've talked about that over the years, haven't we, together?
Yes.
Talking about Lee's sort of slightly bent left arm at impact. And a lot of people say it's a fault, but I think you have a slightly different description for it.
Yes, I mean, I think it's one of the bits of golf and doggerel that everyone knows. Keep the left arm straight, along with head still and all that. But the idea of the left arm staying in line is that it's a lever and it's a spoke. And we know, just from watching the photographs over the last 2 or 3 decades that Lee's been playing, we know that through impact the left arm is bent. So why is that? Well, he's had lots of attempts to try and get rid of it, but I think, you know, he's come to the conclusion, as I would have encouraged him to, that, okay, it's unusual but it's working, so it's a characteristic. It'd only be a fault, Nick, if it wasn't working for him. But why does that happen? Well, the answer is he's incredibly orthodox in the takeaway. He used to be a bit spread-armed, but his arms stay very neat together. So at the top of the backswing, he's super. But if you imagine me punching my arm there, it bends. So when Lee gets to the top of his swing and clears his chest impacts, and this then becomes bent. And that distance is now less. So his head drops a little bit through impact. Now, you'd never teach that, but it's something that he's always done, and you can see it at age 47, he's making it work. So leave it alone. You've done everything else perfectly, Lee. Just keep doing what you're doing.
So it's just a unique trait to Lee's move at the start of the downswing where he rotates his upper body.
Absolutely, and that's why golf coaching is so important in the early stages, is because what you learn the first few hours of instruction tends to stay with you a lifetime. So he picked that up in his youth. Pete Cowan has coached him amongst others, but Pete mainly is his main coach, and they've just accepted that's what happens, and it's not affecting performance because his driving is superb and he flights his irons just wonderfully well at the moment.
Okay, that's great. And our final question for today's session, we've got a email came in from David Betterson asking a little bit about the role of the left shoulder in the golf swing. A lot of the videos we've put onto YouTube and Instagram and Facebook have centered around the role of the left shoulder igniting the backswing, Luther.
Yeah.
And I wondered if you could explain a little bit about how that actually works. The question in the email was really, should the left shoulder move laterally a little bit? Is it a downwards move as it moves underneath the throat? I wonder if you could just explain that, maybe demonstrate as well.
Yeah.
What that looks like.
Yeah. Those of you watching and who regularly watch the video content we put out, it's a recurring theme of the left shoulder, and because there are 50 elements to it, I could spend 3 or 4 hours telling you how simple it all is. But on the assumption that your grip and posture is great, the left shoulder creates those 15 things. The 3 big ones are, it controls the width of the swing, the length of the swing, and very much the tempo. That's the 3 big ones, but there are lots of other ancillary bits that work as a result of the shoulder turn. So if you said to me, was there a key move that everybody should adhere to, I would say yes. But when you tell people of different physical abilities, of different shapes and different levels of commitment to golf, that gives you a variety. But I think if you look at all the players on tour, there are very few golfers where the arm starts before the left shoulder. So if the best players in the world are doing it, and I would say it is the fundamental motor skill of the golf swing. So let me show you that in the Explanar. Obviously, if I were to cock my wrist, that wouldn't be a swinging plane, and I could rotate my forearms on the plane, but I've got nothing from my body. So the shoulder turn, and the first inch particularly, this is where the 15 things ignite from, okay? Now it's very subtle, because this is a good takeaway, and this is a poor takeaway. You can hardly tell the difference. But in the good movement, the shoulders turn and the left shoulder is the igniter. If the arm goes first, we've got a problem. Okay? So, the 15 things are, the left shoulder gives you your swing plane, your path and your widest arc. It gives you your shoulder coil, your torso coil, your hip action, your leg action, your knee flexion, your weight shift. As the shoulder turns, the forearms rotate and rise in the wrist cock. As you load the shoulders, you know the length of your back, so you know the pace. So it's really, really important. It's the key motor skill, whether you're Jim Furyk, Eamon Darcy, Tiger Woods, or Tom Watson, you or me. It's a fundamental principle, goes right through all the clubs. And when I say 15 things, it's not to give you 15 things to worry about. What we're saying is that the grip and posture is good, the left shoulder to the movement. And it takes a bit of understanding. I know in your case, when I've coached you, it took us a while to understand that the shoulder appears to go downwards. It's not dropping, Nick, it's just rotating in a downward manner. Okay? Lots of people think, oh, the shoulder rises or so on. So it is quite difficult in that regard. And if you isolate it and do the wrists and the forearms first, it's easier to see. Can you see that? That's where the shoulder goes. But when you're doing it with the arms and the club, it's a bit more difficult to get. So simple though it is, simple doesn't mean easy.
And it's more of a general concept rather than a specific technical move.
Yeah, lovely. Yeah, it's a big picture. You stand there with great grip and posture, left shoulder to the throat, big picture, not fine detail. You've only got 1.8 seconds to do it, so let's keep it simple.
Wonderful. I think that answers the questions.
Good.
Again, thanks for sending the questions in. We really appreciate it and we really enjoy answering them. So keep them coming. You can contact us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, pretty much everything.
Everywhere. We're everywhere.
Thank you.